Good evening. Welcome to the March 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Stillwater City Council. At this point, I will call our meeting to order and we will jump right in. We're going to have a study session tonight on budget issues. And so item 2A on the agenda is first up a summary of civic feedback on the fiscal year 2022 budget. Jenica?
The Department of Marketing and Civic Engagement. Our department gathers input from residents on a variety of topics year-round using social media, community surveys, email, and several specialized civic engagement platforms such as Speak Up Stillwater and Balancing Act. Civic engagement is one of the city's 6 strategic priorities, and one of the ways our department supports this priority's objectives is by collecting input about the budget. This year, marketing worked with finance to launch a budget input campaign. This campaign primarily ran from November of 2020 through January of 2021. However, we do encourage residents to give us their feedback year-round. And this report actually includes submissions as early as the beginning of this month. We use the budget feedback process as an opportunity to educate the public about how the fiscal year budget is built, how their taxpayer dollars are used to provide core services, and how the city receives revenue to fund those services. While this report is not all-inclusive, I will go over a few highlights from that campaign and some of the common themes that we have found, starting with the results from our interactive online budget tool, Balancing Act. The FY21 budget balancing simulation received over 1,000 page views and 164 submissions. The top 2 ways that individuals accessed this page were directly from the homepage of stillwater.org and from the new budget input landing page that we created, which is stillwater.org/yourmoney. Overall, Balancing Act users elected to increase spending for streets, recreation, and sales tax, and decrease funding for management and support, police, and sales tax. So sales tax made both of those lists. We also received online input in the form of social media comments, emails, and Speak Up Stillwater submissions. One of the benefits of this kind of input is the freedom that it gives residents to let us know exactly what kind of projects they would like to see funded in the future. A few popular suggestions were building a new animal welfare facility, a softball complex, some rails to trails development, and street repairs. In past years, marketing has focused heavily on bringing budget feedback into the digital age and encouraging residents to submit their ideas from home via the internet. While these efforts have created some tremendous returns versus the budget fairs that we used to do, a fully digital approach is not an inclusive approach. This year, marketing and finance really worked together to figure out how we can make this process accessible to those who don't have smartphones or internet access, especially so they could participate from home still, considering COVID. So we created a budget feedback bill insert. The approach was a success, and marketing received just as many bill inserts as we did online submissions. At the bottom of the bill insert, we put a checkbox asking if you had used our online budget tool before. Of those that responded, approximately 95% said no, they had not, and many of them made comments that they were not tech savvy or that they didn't have access to a computer. So I think we were really able to reach a new demographic with this mail-in option. The other major trends we saw here were increased funding for streets, police, recreation, and fire, and decreased funding for recreation, management and support, community development, and the airport. As a whole, the most widely selected topic across all platforms that residents would like to see more funding for in the future was street repairs. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jenica. I appreciate the feedback. That's really great to hear that you all came up with the bill insert idea too, because I think that's a great idea to make sure we're getting feedback from everybody, not just those folks who have computers and get online and use that. So I appreciate that. Councilors, any questions?
No questions.
Anybody surprised that street repair is the major concern?
No.
Pat, it looks like you're talking, but I can't hear you.
That's okay. I'm just nodding my head.
Still can't hear you.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's a problem on our end. I can't hear you guys either, Amy.
You can't?
You can't
That might
hear
be a
us?
problem on our end.
Yeah.
Test, because we can all hear each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give us just a second. We're working on a technical difficulty. I assume you can hear us fine. This meetings would go a lot faster if you guys just didn't get to talk at all. Can we hear you now?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
I didn't have anything substantive to say, Will, but I am thankful to marketing for reaching out to a whole nother group of people. And of course, I would love to have a discussion of what conclusions you could draw from these responses, but we'll do that another night.
Can you turn one of those? I think that's okay. Well, we're still getting a little echo here, but other counselors, comments?
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jenica. Appreciate it. All right. Next up is Christy and Leah to discuss the proposed operating budget.
All right, good evening. Christy Cluck, Finance Director. Do we need to fix that? Okay, so over the last several months, staff has worked on preparing a proposed FY22 budget for the council's consideration. And so tonight, Leah Berry, our budget specialist, and I will be tag teaming throughout the presentation to provide an overview of that FY22 budget. And just
We may have lost your sound.
operation.
No, hold on a second. Are we back?
We're back. Yeah.
Norman, you're going to have to unmute them so that I can hear if they can hear us.
We can hear you, Will.
Yeah.
We can hear you well.
He was dropping out.
We
wanna
lost
try?
Christy when her. Oh, I wonder if you can hear.
No. Did that mic get turned off?
Is there something on here?
Your handheld one?
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
We will try again. So just as a reminder, preparation and adoption of an annual budget is required by state statute, and the proposed budget before you is in compliance with those statutes. The City Council adopts a strategic plan, and on this slide is a list of the strategic priorities included in the updated plan that Council will consider for adoption in May. This strategic plan provides a framework for city management, the finance department, and city staff to follow as the budget's prepared. Our budget cycle is a year-round process. We're currently concluding the budget preparation phase and now transitioning into the council approval phase. Going into the budget preparation phase, the city sought feedback from our citizens, which Jenica just reported on, and that feedback has been considered as the budget has been prepared. The timeline that we've identified to complete budget adoption includes a public hearing to be held on April 19th, and then presentation of budget resolutions to the council for approval on May 17th. At any time during the remainder of the adoption process, if there are changes that need to be made, finance will work to incorporate those changes. And so now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Leah Berry.
Thank you, Christy. Good evening, I'm Leah Berry, the budget specialist. Tonight I'm going to walk you through the FY22 proposed budget. This is going to be a high-level presentation of the budget by major fund type, and category, with transfers excluded. Details by fund and department are included as part of the agenda packet. First, we'll look at revenues. These numbers remain the same as those presented in the February 1st presentation to Council. The FY22 total proposed revenue budget is $117.5 million. Overall, this is a decrease compared to the FY21 adopted budget by a total of $2.6 million. Some major differences include a net $100,000 decrease in sales and use tax, $470,000 decrease in fines and forfeitures, $300,000 decrease in lodging tax, $270,000 decrease in interest revenue, $400,000 decrease in water sales due to decreasing revenue trends over time, and a $775,000 increase in waste management fees due to the new rate structure approved by trustees in December, effective January 1st. Here we are looking at the same revenue numbers. This time we're just looking at the source rather than the fund. So we'll go through each category here. Electric revenue encompasses 45% of the total revenue budget. Sales and use tax is 26%. Water is 12%. Other revenues are 6%. This includes things like other taxes, fees for services, licenses and permits, and miscellaneous revenue. Wastewater revenue encompasses 6% of the total revenue budget, and waste management is 5%. As you can see, each revenue source has remained constant or decreased, with the exception of waste management due to the new rate structure. One thing to note is that the water and wastewater revenues go to fund those operations and do not contribute to the operation of the general fund. Next, we'll move on to expenditures by fund type. The FY22 total proposed expenditure budget is $112.5 million. Overall, this is an increase compared to FY21 by a total of $2.9 million. $1.9 million of that is an increase in capital, and the remainder is an increase in a combination of personnel and other services and fees, which we'll talk about in more detail in a few slides. We do want to note that although the FY22 proposed budget is greater than FY21, the FY21 adopted budget was down significantly from FY20, which was $115.5 million. This was due to a decrease of $4.9 million in purchase power and $1.6 million in capital. Again, similar to revenues, here we have the same expenditure numbers, but by category. Personnel encompasses 44% of our total expenditure budget. Purchase power is 22%. Other services and fees is 15%. Debt service is 8%. Materials and supplies is 6%. And capital outlay is 5%. Here we want to highlight a few notable expenditure items that are included in the budget. We have $2.9 million in city capital. We'll cover that in a little more detail as well. $1.6 million for the construction of the waste management recycling staging facility. $1 million in city grant match. As we make grant applications a priority, we want to make sure that we can cover our match obligations, so we have set aside $1 million for this purpose. We have an increase in purchase power by $750,000. As we mentioned earlier, this number had a large decrease from FY20 to FY21, and it was necessary this year to bring that up a little bit to meet our expenditure needs. In addition, we had a $520,000 increase in police and fire payroll. This was due to 3 new positions in detention to meet state requirements, increased overtime, and several items that were previously unbudgeted, such as comp time payoff, holidays worked, standby on-call, and pension on overtime. These previously unbudgeted items in the past have been absorbed through budget vacancies, but when personnel costs in FY21 were exceeding projections, those items were discovered and included as part of the FY22 budget. Because personnel is our largest expenditure category, we have a little bit more detail here. We have 631 total positions budgeted in FY22. This is an overall decrease of 5 positions when compared to FY21. The unfilled positions have grown by 17 positions because as natural employee turnover occurred this fiscal year, each unfilled position was closely reviewed to determine the continued need for that position. Of the total 61 unfilled positions, 43 are full-time and 18 are part-time. As we come to the end of a very uncertain fiscal year, we want to give some assurances on the balances of our reserve funds. The first 5 funds listed have fully funded reserves. This includes the general fund of $11 million, self-insurance fund of $1 million, the electric fund of $15 million, the water fund of $11 million, and the wastewater fund of $7 million. Those not fully funded include waste management and airport. The waste management fund has a reserve target of $1 million, and the drawdown of this reserve was planned in the cost of service study for the construction of the recycling staging facility. Those reserves will be replenished as the increased revenue from rate changes is collected over the next several years. The airport fund has a reserve target of $3 million. This has not had a funding source identified in the past. However, included in the FY22 budget for the first time is a $250,000 transfer from the general fund to the airport retention fund to move toward a fully funded airport reserve. Here we have some additional detail on the city capital that's included in the budget. As a reminder, the city capital fund was created in FY19 as a way to track and prioritize ongoing capital investment. This slide is a summary of the city capital fund budget, and you have the details by department and project listed in your packets. For the FY22 proposed budget, city capital totals $2.9 million. This includes $1.2 million to police, $640,000 to public works, $370,000 to airport, $300,000 to community resources and the library, $230,000 to IT, $130,000 to other city capital, and $100,000 to emergency management. The $130,000 to other city capital includes all department whose capital projects totaled less than $100,000. Those are combined there. In addition, fire will start the procurement process for 2 replacement engines totaling $1 million. Those will be debt funded with payments started in FY23. We are really excited to say that all department capital requests for FY22 were able to be included in this budget. Funding for that comes from the approximately $3.3 million in projected beginning fund balance. $2.1 million of that was transferred in December of 2020 from the excess transfer to the general fund at the direction of the council.
So on this slide is a history of the annual transfers from the SUA to the city's general fund. And this slide was not included in your meeting packet, but since the annual transfers tend to be a topic of interest, we wanted to go ahead and provide this information and some discussion on the amount. So the top row of this table represents the transfer included in the adopted budget. And that would be with the exception of the FY22 column, which of course that is just our proposed budget at this time. The second row represents the amount determined during the year-end closing process to be excess transfers. This is in accordance with the SUA transfer policy. And I will point out on the FY21 column that the 1.3 million in excess transfers is the budget amendment that was approved at the last council meeting. So that number will change as we close out FY21. The third row is the net transfer needed to balance the general fund at the close of the fiscal year. So it's essentially row 1 minus row 2. You can see that the net transfer comes in less each year than what was projected when the budget was developed and adopted. And this is due to things such as unspent appropriations during the year, which would be payroll vacancies or maybe unused contingency dollars. And in some cases, it's due to revenues coming in higher than originally projected. Also included in your packet is a document that's titled General Fund Budget Analysis. And this explains the dependency of the general fund on this transfer from the SUA. And so Leah and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you both for clear and concise presentation of the budget. Counselors, I think we'll be able to hear you if you have questions.
I don't have any questions. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you so much. This information, every year I say this, it seems like the last 3 or 4 years, the information just has gotten better and clearer for those of us who don't live these numbers every day. And it was just very nice to have this to look at, and appreciate how well you broke it down. And if we have any questions from people, I feel confident that we can answer to a certain degree and then go on if we need to. But this is very helpful information and spread out very well. So thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
I especially appreciate, I ditto what Councilor Zanotti said, but I also really appreciate the general fund budget analysis page. And I highly recommend citizens look at this because this explains monies that we spend that are mandated by state law, by city charter, by city ordinance. And it's, you just start off with those costs. And so it's a really helpful page. And as Councilor Zanotti said, the presentation was clear and understandable. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think this goes back maybe to a little bit of what Danica was talking about earlier, but we have these really neat tools, online tools, and then I love that we did a bill insert this year to receive input back from the public. Can you talk a little bit? It was interesting, right? There's these conflicting, like some people say decrease funding for this, but then other people say increase funding for this. So there's kind of that tension in the community between those things. How some of those initiatives or things that are important to the community are, like, how they're evaluated and how we see those in the numbers. Is that and maybe it's just an explanation, but of our department heads getting together and understanding there's a focus on a certain topic, and that's how we see those numbers maybe impacted in the budget. I don't know if I'm asking the question well, but just to kind of understand how we take that and integrate that and how those might be showing up in our numbers.
I'll speak to the capital. Maybe that would be the best place for me to start, is speaking to the process to evaluate our capital requests. And we have a priority ranking system that we ask our department heads to use whenever they submit those. And so that's their department's evaluation of how that request fits in the community and in comparison with the other departments' requests and needs. Then those requests are pooled together, and we have a review committee that's made up of employees across the city that look at those things in comparison and across all departments. And again, they go through and rank those same requests. They're evaluating them for need. They're asking follow-up questions when they feel like they need additional information to be able to support funding that or to maybe cut it from the list. Once that review committee comes up with a recommendation, that's submitted to the city manager's office, and it kind of goes through another vetting process, looking at the city manager's office looks at that, and I will say they made adjustments to that this year because they're looking to make sure that it fits in with the strategic plan and that it is fulfilling the wants and needs and wishes of the citizens.
Helpful, I think, for our community to kind of see maybe a little bit behind the curtain on how we make some of, how staff make some of those decisions, and how the city manager's office can kind of zoom out and from a larger community perspective on the budget. I think sometimes those numbers, it's hard to see where your input might kind of affect or impact those decisions. So thank you, that was a great description.
Other comments? I've got a couple questions here. As part of fiscal year 21, we put a hold on, or maybe it was fiscal year 20. At some point last year, we had a hold on capital spending because of the concerns around coronavirus and the impacts on the budget. Have those funds fully been released? Were we able to fully release all the capital funds that were part of that fiscal year's budget?
Yes, so all of the capital that was put on hold was released, and those projects are proceeding. We did also put holds, or not necessarily holds, but some restrictions on just our O&M, and then the evaluation of open positions. And those things remain in place, but there's no longer a hold on the capital items.
Okay, so this the capital money in fiscal year 2022 isn't a carryover from any of the projects that.
No, it's not.
That's good. Can you give do we have any more detail on maybe some of what's included in police or public works or the airport capital funds that are part of this budget?
Yes, and in your packet, there's a schedule that's titled Proposed Capital Projects for Fiscal Year 22.
That's the spreadsheet?
Yeah, it's pretty small print. We tried to fit it on one page.
There it is, yeah.
So looking under police, there's replacement of 8 patrol vehicles, purchase of body-worn cameras for all officers, replacement of all police tasers, purchase additional animal welfare vehicle, repaint and repair jail cells, and then purchase new patrol boat.
So this is why I looked at this before, but this number at the total at the bottom is 5.4 million. So I wasn't sure how that matched up with the 2.9.
Yes, so this one-page schedule is across the entire organization, but those things that are SUA in nature are not included in the city capital fund.
That makes sense. Okay. So the police capital budget includes body-worn cameras for all officers?
It does.
That's new. I don't know that we've talked about that much. That's a good thing. We might need to have a meeting about that, or discuss that more in one of these meetings. That's an issue that's been brought up in several community discussions that I've had. So I think we should talk a little bit more about what that'll look like at some point. So my other big question, I guess, is if we hear that the feedback from a lot of folks is streets and transportation, where would I go in this budget to tell people, hey, we heard you, streets and transportation are an issue. Here's what we're doing in fiscal year 2022's budget to address those concerns.
Right. And Monty Carnes is here, and he is welcome to jump in and help answer this question. Specifically, The half-cent sales tax fund is dedicated to street maintenance. For the most part, I believe that's pavement management program, which there's roughly $4 million that is transferred into that fund each year, just due to the collection of the half-cent sales tax. There's another piece, $350,000 in the general fund that is for striping. Do you want to add to that?
The 350 is for next year?
For next year.
Oh, great. That was good news. Yeah, so the 350 for the striping is probably the only capital project we've got for next year. You touched on a couple of capital improvement projects that were put on hold. Two of those were the bridges on 3rd Avenue and Husband Street over East Boomer Creek. We're in the process of condemning some right-of-way for those projects. We feel like that'll be in pretty good shape by the 1st of June to start bidding that and award those bridge contracts this summer. So that's good news. We're meeting on the Husband Street corridor. The consultants have kicked that off, or we're setting up the kickoff meeting with the committee. We've started the 6th Avenue corridor consulting project with that, and the first public input meeting will be March the 31st from 5 to 7:30 p.m. at the Community Center. Thank you. Other projects, just give you a brief update. The Perkins Road project improvements that ODOT is funding the construction, and we've been participating in the design and utility relocation. That's now scheduled to bid in June and start either fall or late November. The Western Road extension or airport arterial, we're over 65% complete with the design. The water line's about 90%. We're still doing environmental clearance. We expect that to occur late this summer, so we'd expect that project to move ahead later in the fall. Back to the other projects on pavement management, our fiscal year 20 projects that you approved last year. We're finishing up design. We've started bidding some of those. You'll see request to award projects in April and May on that program. And then later on next month, we'll be bringing the fiscal year 21 program for your consideration. I will tell you on the wish list, there are 16 projects that total $62 million plus or minus a few million. If you have any spare change laying around, we'd be happy to spend it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Monty. I appreciate you ending on the $62 million note. That's helpful. I mean, I think it is a good point to bring up. I mean, we've talked many, many times about how the half-cent sales tax contributes 4.5, somewhere around that $1 million to our dedicated transportation funding, but that's not enough money to keep up. It's barely enough money maybe to keep up. It's certainly not enough money to make the improvements, these 16 wish list projects. I mean, we're not.
We've talked before at $4 million, if we started with just the local streets, rebuilt our worst ones to 30-year standard, never touched an arterial, spent it all just on local streets, it would take us 62 years to rebuild every street to a 30-year standard. Obviously, we can't get there with our current funding. So we look at all the techniques we can to stretch it as far as we can.
So I guess my question is, do we feel like we've done everything we can to find additional funding out of the general fund in excess of the half-cent sales tax to find more? I mean, over the last couple of fiscal years, we found some money in some different places. Are we out of other places we can try to find money to put back in? This probably isn't for you, Money, because I'm sure you've asked the same question. But that I think is the $62 million question around town, right? Is where do we get the funds to take these extra projects on rather than just trying to tread water on street repairs?
Right, and right now, there's not an additional identified funding source that exists. And I will say that in FY '21, in total, between the general fund, the capital fund, and the half-cent sales tax fund, there is $18.9 million that's been appropriated in FY '21. And I'll go out on a limb here.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Between the general fund, city capital fund, and the half-cent sales tax fund, for FY '21, there is $18.9 million appropriated
For transportation projects?
for transportation projects. And I was going to say, there's a process to getting the projects complete, and I know Monty has talked extensively about what that process looks like as far as design, and I think there's only so much staff that can turn out the projects too.
So we've gone in and relooked in engineering about how we design and construct projects and have kind of restructured what we're doing. And as part of that, we've identified maybe some more positions we need, as well as being more efficient in how we get projects done. And we're in the process of pulling the trigger on that. We've made great strides in our pavement management, turning those projects around and getting them out in a timely manner. And I think we'll be seeing that in our other projects as well.
So we only have the capacity to do so much given our current staffing structures. But again, if we could find funding somewhere, we could increase our staffing capacity as well, right, to make sure we're able to do more projects.
And that's kind of the beauty I like about this new structure, is we can scale it up when the time comes to do that. Also remember, we accumulate money in our pavement management and then we spend it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have these projects with ODOT that are sometimes last very long. So we set back our commitments to those projects. Certainly on Perkins Road, we've had some money sitting there for a while. The Western Extension Airport Arterial, we have that money already. We've agreed to do it. That money is sitting there in the account. Really hasn't been encumbered yet, but yet we know we're going to spend it. So that's one of the reasons those balances will look a little large at times.
Okay. Thank you, Monty.
Mayor, I have a
I have one more question. Do you want to say something about that, Norman?
Well, if I could, just one moment, Mary, the sheet that Vice Mayor Garland referred to that analyzes the general fund is pretty telling when you look at the revenue source and our projection of $23,923 and change for 22. And when we get past those departments mandated by state law, we have roughly $1,400,000 left to fund all of those departments. And that's one of the reasons that transfer is so important. To be able to do more streets, we're going to have to find a way to increase revenue, and that's really the bottom line. Or cut services.
Nobody likes either one of those answers, Norman. I know. Well, that kind of answers what my other question was going to be, just around the increase in the transfer for this coming year. I mean, we've going back to that historical slide around what the effective transfers have been over the last couple of years. With a $17 million budget this year, it's a fair jump from what we've seen as the effective transfers. Can you maybe give a little background there?
Yeah, that did jump this year. One thing is that our general fund revenues were down $500,000, so right there we have to make up the difference. And then the rest of it is that transfers and expenditures in the general fund were up about $900,000. So that's really the difference. And those increases this year in the expenditures and the transfers, Leah kind of already touched on that, but the street markings of $350,000, police and fire budget together was almost $800,000 increase. And then the HBA program, Home Buyers Assistance Program, we are transferring $75,000 to that this year.
Okay. This is a ton of work and a lot of numbers, and not just a ton of work by your department, although it's a ton of work by your department, but everybody else putting together budget requests. I know we didn't talk about it a ton tonight, but the zero-based budgeting approach where everybody starts from what do we actually need this year, and not just, yeah, this is what we got last year, and put it over. I mean, that increases the amount of work, I'm sure.
Yes, we ask a lot of our department heads, but they always rise to the challenge.
Well, we appreciate that a whole lot. Counselors, any further questions or comments?
I have a comment, Mayor, about everybody's response always being fix the streets. It's such an easy answer, and it's so non-specific. I mean, we have fixed a lot of streets. Perhaps a more specific question would be, what 3 streets do we need to repair? And we could be more sensitive to citizens' request for repairing streets if we could say, okay, well, 99% of the people who answered this said Duck Street. And so we need to absolutely do something with Duck Street, rather than just allowing people to say fix the street. And not, we really can't do anything with that.
Yeah, I think there's some, that's a good thing. We do need to go out and try to get more specific information on what it is that people want to see funded, so that we can prioritize those things and then figure out how we're going to actually pay for it, because I think that's the big issue here, is that we just don't have the excess funding to dump into those major projects. Duck, the rebuild that Duck needs is what, I can't remember the last time we talked about it, $6 or $8 or $10 million, right?
It's huge, but if 99%
It's
of the
14.5 million.
Of course, 6 plus 8 million.
if that's what 99% of the people want
I could have,
repaired,
I'm sorry, Pat.
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, could you repeat that?
if 99% of the people, I'm just making up numbers, of course, want Duck Street repaired, and they know that it's going to be $14.9 million, we're going to say, okay, we can either raise sales tax or we're going to do a bond issue. And you've spoken. This is what you want done.
Yeah.
So I just think it needs to be a more specific question so that people can actually see that their input matters.
So I wanted to address a few of your comments, and I think they are spot on about how we select projects. Again, on the pavement management, we have a very scientific way of how we do that. And again, the idea is we spend a little bit of money on good streets to keep them good longer, and all the way down to rebuilding bad ones. In years past, I believe, best I can tell, there was a concentration on what gave us the maximum increase in our overall number. And there's certainly rationale for doing that, but it also meant we were spending money on streets that really had low ADT. And so we've started incorporating, and ADT is average daily traffic. We've started kind of concentrating the same concept, that we spend money on bad streets and a little bit on good streets. And we're concentrating more right now on collectors and arterials, so that those affect the most people and the most traffic. Duck Street is actually one that we will be bidding here shortly for a mill and overlay from 6th to Boomer. And I've forgotten what the cost of that is, but that'll get us several years more on that. We think once we get those arterials and collectors up to decent shape, we can spend less money on them, still maintaining them there, and then now let us concentrate on some of the other areas. So, Councilor Darlington, I think you're right that, the public does want to see some improvements, and that's the way that we're trying to do that is the high visibility ones that have ADT, but still we're using our pavement management principles to make sure we're spending those dollars wisely. And a quick example of that was we did Main Street, and there were a lot of folks said, no, we should have done Duck. Structurally, they're rated about the same, but Main Street had more traffic. So we did Main Street before we did Duck.
That makes sense. Thank you, Monty. Counselors? All right. Well, thank you again for the presentations. Just to reiterate the third or fourth time, the work you all done on putting these numbers together, but then also presenting them in a clear fashion. The spreadsheets and the summaries are really improved, much improved over the first time I started looking at this stuff 6 years ago or so. So we appreciate the work that you guys have done. All right. That takes us to the end of the agenda. Before we move for an adjournment, I did have an unfortunate announcement I wanted to pass along to folks who maybe hadn't heard that former Mayor Dr. Terry Miller had passed away on March 10th. Dr. Miller previously served two terms as the mayor of Stillwater from 1991 to 1997. He also ran a dental practice and was a beloved dentist in the community for several decades. Our condolences collectively go out to his wife, Martha, and the rest of the family. He was a wonderful servant of our community here in Stillwater and will be greatly missed. On that note, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a motion from Vice Mayor Darlington and a second from Councilor Jaloski. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the City Council meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all for joining us.